Okay, so I think I've admitted everyone who is in the waiting room. Hello, everybody.
Hi.
Howdy.
So by default, your microphone is probably muted. So if you wish to speak, you'll need to unmute yourself.
I just did it.
Right.
Oh, great. Hey, so Brody, that's your name.
Yeah.
You were the one who requested ducks at the last in-person meeting in the library, right?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm glad you're here because there are going to be ducks.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, well, thank you. It was a good suggestion. Okay, so let's see. I'm checking with my checklist of everything I need to do. And make sure I've done it all. So just to check in quickly with Tom, the link went out to people via the email. Is that
not for the YouTube yet because I've got too many. I can't seem to do it on iPad, so I'm
okay?
changing to my laptop.
Okay, so I will not bother you. Let me know when that's done, just so I make sure it's done.
Yep.
But they'll figure it. They'll get it eventually, and the people who are watching the live stream can watch the live stream. But I'm going to continue the meeting now for the benefit of the people who are here in Zoom. Let's see. Oh yeah, I was going to do that, but I'm not going to. Sorry, I'm talking to myself again. Skipping things in my checklist because I don't think they're important. Okay. Okay, well, welcome everyone to this, the inaugural online meeting of Carpinteria Birdwatchers. We are a small but doughty group of birdwatchers in Carpinteria, California, a lovely beach town just down the road from Santa Barbara. And historically, we've met once a month at the Carpinteria Library for an in-person meeting. And then we've gone out a group outing once a month somewhere around Carpinteria. For reasons that I'm sure. What's that? All right, I'll just keep going. For reasons I'm sure that are obvious to everyone, we're not having in-person meetings now. So this is our substitute for that. I'm going to go ahead and switch to speaker view. So I should be, again, I'm still learning how all this works. I should be a big head on your screen now. Is that right? So okay, so those who are watching via Zoom have thumbnails of other participants. And I'm going to be figuring this out as I go and switching back and forth between the different modes, and hopefully it works and makes sense. I guess a few quick tips for those who are new to video conferencing. I'd like to ask that those in the Zoom meeting that you mute your mic when you're not actually speaking. It helps to keep the noise down. The co-hosts in the meeting, they can go and ask you to mute your mic in the chat, or they can just mute it for you. But just be aware that if you start talking and no one seems to be hearing you, check to see if your mic is muted and unmute it. Be aware that those of you who have your camera activated, which is most of you, that you are on video, and we are streaming this out on a YouTube live stream that we're then going to archive for future reference and people can watch later. So just be aware that you are putting yourself out there in public as you participate in this. And I'm very happy that you're participating, and just be aware though. Jenny was telling a story during one of the practice runs we did that she was on a work Zoom call, I think, and someone did not realize their camera was on and thought they would multitask by changing their clothes during the meeting, and that didn't work out well. So let's not have any of that. Let's see. So I'm going to provide opportunities for feedback during the meeting. There are some features in Zoom that make it easier to do that gracefully. You should have the option, depending on your Zoom setup, whether you're on an iPad or a desktop computer, to do the raise hand functionality. And if you do that, then in the participants list that I can see, I will see a raised hand. And if I'm doing my job, I'll notice that and pause for input at some point. Let's see. You do have this group chat function, and looking in the group chat on Zoom, I see that Tom has sent the YouTube live stream link via email, so that's great. So people who are on the Carpinteria Birdwatchers mailing list will now have that link, and they can go watch it on Zoom. And what else do we have going on? I think that's pretty much it for the intro stuff. I would like to introduce some special guests who we have. I'm going to start with Dave Perexta. And Dave, if you talk, I think it will, in speaker mode, bring you up so people will see your image.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, I was muted again, apparently. I'm not.
Yeah, so I'm curious, those of you watching who are not me, did you see Dave come up in the large format in the speaker mode when he spoke?
Yep.
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, great.
I'm sorry to subject you all to that. So.
So Dave is a very experienced birdwatcher and pelagic birder. And, I didn't even realize until fairly recently that you also, you do pelagic birding professionally in a sense. Is that right, Dave?
Well, I do work with seabirds and I do research and analysis of seabird issues. So not pelagic birding professionally necessarily, but I do seabirds 24/7, it seems sometimes.
Yeah.
So.
And it just struck me as funny because, I've talked to some people who are bird watchers who are surprised to interact with sort of academic ornithological types or even field ornithologists for whom bird watching is very much an afterthought or something they would just never even do. Like they're interested in the scientific question and the analysis, but you wouldn't catch them on their day off, going out there to do more of it. And it seems like you do
precisely. And in fact, at Pacific Seabird Group, which I have the Puffin t-shirt here from this year, we schedule a pelagic trip to coincide with the conference every year. And we might get 10 people that sign up. That just, in the academic world, you don't see a lot of people that are what you would consider hardcore bird watchers. So yeah, it's interesting dichotomy there that,
Okay, well, I'm going to pester you a lot with questions, but I want to keep things moving, so I'm going to come back to you if that's okay.
Yep, perfect.
Pretty much throughout the discussion, I've got all these little notes, comments in my notes like, oh, what does Dave think about this? Another guest I'd like to introduce is Linus, and am I pronouncing it correctly? Blomqvist?
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
Thanks.
It's tricky. It's a Swedish name, but.
Yeah, so Linus is a local bird watcher these days around Santa Barbara, which I know from seeing your eBird list. But you come from Sweden originally and did a lot of Seawatch bird watching there, right?
That's correct. Yeah, I lived in Sweden until I was about 19, 20 years old, and I did sea watching for probably 7 or 8 of those years.
Yeah, and then you've been doing it out here as well, and doing some really interesting reports.
I just moved to Santa Barbara in August last year, so I try to get out when the winds pick up a little bit from the west, sort of imitating the sort of habits I had in Sweden when I was sea watching there.
Excellent. So I'm going to come back and talk to you about that shortly when we get to the part about sea watching. But that's great. Thank you for agreeing on short notice to be part of this. And then another guest we have is Anne Fraser. And if I can get you to unmute and respond just to make sure that everything is working as expected.
Yeah, I'm just part of the normal group.
Well, that makes you extra special. But in this case, and that's Robert, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, so you two, as I gathered again from a very recent email, you were recently on was it a 9-day pelagic excursion, and primarily a whale excursion, but down to San Ignacio Lagoon in Baja?
Right.
Yeah, so I want to talk to you guys about that. And I've got some photos of that you forwarded to me that I'd love to show and get you to.
By good fortune, Dave Peretska, who's on the line, was our resident ornithologist.
Yeah, I thought this was really interesting that, the last thing I did as a group birding activity before we all went into isolation was a pelagic birding trip out of Ventura with Island Packers. And Dave was the organizer of that trip, as he is of most of the pelagic trips, well, all of the pelagic trips that I've been on. But I didn't realize until hearing about your, Anne and Robert's trip to Baja that, oh, Dave is just coming back from a 9-day, pelagic trip and, turned right around a few days later and was leading this trip out of Ventura, a 1-day trip. So I thought that was fun.
No rest for the weary.
Yeah. Well, so I'm going to come back to you guys too when we get to the part about pelagic trips. So I want to show your slides and get you to maybe narrate a little bit about what we're seeing there. Okay, so that's it, I think, for introductions. And if I can find where in my outline I'm supposed to be. Oh, you know, one last thing no, actually, okay, I'll mention one last thing really quick. There's been a lot of discussion online in the last week or two about people doing malicious things in Zoom meetings. So I just want to, you know, the phenomenon of Zoom bombing is, if you Google that and read articles, it's very scary sounding, but it's like online trolls who invade Zoom meetings and do annoying things. I want to assure you that I have done what I think is an adequate job of securing our meeting against things like that. But in the event that something happens, you know, we are prepared to swing into action and do our best to escort them swiftly and unceremoniously out of the meeting. But just to be aware, if you are concerned about that, or if that's something you'd like to avoid, we do have the YouTube live stream as an option. You can use the link that's in the group chat here in Zoom and view that version of the meeting. It's a little less interactive, but and it's also delayed 20 or 30 seconds from the version that we're having here. But it also is more immune to, you know, annoying people suddenly showing up and making your life difficult. Okay, so with that said, are there any questions about any of that before we go on and start to talk about birds, seabirds, ocean birds? All right, I'm seeing no virtual hand raises, so I'm going to assume that means no questions, and we'll go on. Yeah, so, and bear with me, this is all very new to me. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and then I'm going to try and get my presentation up. And I will try to go back to the beginning. And then I want to do one more thing. How do I get this back? Show video panel, yes. Okay, so if I have done what I think I have done, you should now be seeing the Santa Monica Creek Orchard Oriole. Give me a thumbs up if somebody is seeing that, and I'll know that we're good. All right, I see thumbs, that's good. So, so I'm just gonna click through these slides, and I'll try to be fairly deft about popping in and out of the screen share view and going back to the video. So we already talked about the new online format of these meetings, the fact that our group outings are obviously suspended for now. So Carpinteria Birdwatchers are still bird watching, but we're doing it individually. And I just want to mention, you know, for me, it's been a real helpful thing in these times that, you know, I can go out there and bird watch locally, at least. I'm doing a little less non-essential travel, so I'm not, you know, gallivanting all over the county. But to see that the birds don't care, you know, the birds are going on with their lives. There's black-headed grosbeaks in my neighborhood. There's, you know, hooded orioles and Bullock's orioles coming through. So even if I'm not running around to chase the birds down, they're coming to me, and I can still have that fun, you know, that release from stressing out reading the news all day. But anyway, our group outings will not be happening for the foreseeable future. But in this class, we're going to talk about ocean birds. So on we go with ocean birds. So I'm going to talk generally some sort of general topics about ocean birds. And my intention is that this is going to take about maybe 30 minutes or so, and then we'll have a 5-minute break, and then maybe another 30 minutes after that to talk about actual local species that we have around here.
Can I jump in for a second?
Yes,
Sorry.
definitely.
I do have to go at 5.
Okay.
So if you wanted to just make sure you ask me any questions you wanted to ask me before then, that'd be great.
Yeah, we'll definitely do that. And I think Anne had said something similar, that she had another Zoom appointment at 5. So turns out people have a very busy schedule these days with Zoom meetings. So yeah, in fact, I have front loaded. The plan is that to get most of the essential honored guest discussion out of the way in the first half. So over the next 30 minutes. So we should be good that way, as long as I keep moving. But that's an excellent question. Thank you for pointing that out. Okay, so a first obvious question is how to see ocean birds. And sort of the easiest way in my book to see ocean birds is just go bird watching at the beach, you know, go bird watching along the coast. And while you're looking at the birds on land or the birds right next to the shore, look out farther to sea and see what you can see out there. It's kind of obvious, so I won't really dwell on it, and I'm trying to go fast. But that is sort of, you know, for me, that is the lowest effort version of ocean birding, is to just see what's out there. And it definitely pays to, I mean, most of you probably know this already, but it really pays to scan for a while, like scan regularly, even on a fairly calm day, like when I took this photo. You can be looking out there and think there are no birds there at all. And then, you know, a few minutes later, you realize, oh no, there's a loon right there. You know, it just happened to be underwater the last time I scanned. And they spend a lot of time feeding, you know, below the surface. And you get a lot of stuff flying by too. You know, a lot of these ocean bird species that are near the shore are cruising up and down the shore. So if you're alert to that possibility, you'll see them come by. Oh, and I skipped a slide. So slide two, method two is to do a Seawatch. And this is what I was talking briefly with Linus about, and had an interesting email exchange with him about. You know, this is the idea that you go to a specific spot, hopefully a little bit elevated, right? You want to be a little bit above water level if you can, because you get a better view. And ideally, you'd be on a headland that kind of projects out into the ocean, because that will tend to concentrate the birds as they're, you know, going up and down the coast. I have a few spots around Carpinteria. Carpinteria doesn't have a great headland for sea watching, but, you know, it has some okay spots. Tar Pits Park is where I went sea watching yesterday. So that's just down at the end of Calle Ocho. You walk down towards the beach, and there's a nice little bluff there. The Harbor Seal Overlook, you know, we have that great Harbor Seal haul out, that pupping location right by Casitas Pier. That's a good spot for sea watching on those bluffs there. And then another good spot is the upper parking area at Rincon Beach Park. So if you go to Rincon and you're pulling in off the freeway and you turn right to go up the hill, that parking area there has a good view of some local seabird habitat. And I just wanted to mention briefly, so Linus, you know, the email exchange that made me think of inviting you in here, you were talking about how it seemed to you there was less sea watching happening here in California than you were used to back in Sweden. And in particular, I guess on very windy days, it's good for sea watching. In fact, I think that's my next slide. Yeah, so stormy conditions are good for sea watching. Yeah, can you amplify on that?
Yeah, I think there's sort of two different kinds of sea watching in a way. They're not mutually exclusive. But you might, so around here, you might have the spring migration of loons and surf scooters and so on. They might come on a pretty calm day, or, you know, with very light winds. They need to get up the coast anyway, so they're going to pass by, and you know, in a variety of wind conditions, they don't need to be they don't need to be drifted in by the wind, so to speak. But then there's, you know, if you want to have a chance of seeing birds that typically occur a little further out, like more pelagic birds, then you want to look at, in this place, winds that are from probably the west and southwest primarily. So I used to do both in Sweden as well. But we have, I think, like a more regular storms with winds from the right directions there, because we have these big low pressure systems coming in across the North Sea that every fall you get like a number of those storms that with good conditions for birds to kind of drift all the way in past Denmark and onto the Swedish west coast.
And I remember you telling me that, you know, on a good windy day like that, there would be, you know, dozens or even hundreds of people out with spotting scopes on these headlands, you know, looking at seabirds. Is that your experience?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think Sweden doesn't have any tradition of like going out on a boat to watch seabirds. And it doesn't even, like, there's no continental shelf or anything where there's just seabirds, like pelagic birds hanging out that you could reach from Sweden. So the sea watching from land is really the only way you can get to see these birds, but there's a very strong like culture of doing sea watching in these good wind conditions, especially in the fall, but really year round. Our coastline on the western side, which is where you can see pelagic birds, is about 200 miles. So it's from here, like same distance as from here to like Monterey, basically. And yeah, if you have a good day coming up, you'll probably have 50, 100, 150 people along that coastline spread out across the different headlands, watching, looking for pelagic birds. It's a very different. When I first moved to California, I was like, wait, why isn't there more people out sea watching? Because I was used to that being a really big part of birding, really, especially certain times of the year.
And so of the local areas around Santa Barbara, what's your favorite place to do a sea watch?
I've typically been going to Coal Oil Point. Campus Point would probably be equally good, but I live a little closer to Coal Oil Point. That's probably would be one of the better ones, like up on this part of along the coast, because it sticks out a little bit. And yeah, you can find, there's a spot there you can find Lee, which is also kind of necessary. If you're going out specifically in the strong winds, you want to be a little bit sheltered somewhere.
And so Dave, your camera appears to be off, or at least I'm not seeing you on the thumbnail. Oh, there you are. Okay. And I'm curious, I know you do a fair amount of sea watching as well. You kind of saved our bacon on the Carpinteria Christmas count more than once when we didn't get a boat out by doing a sea watch. Do you have any input on any sea watch tips or any wisdom to impart about effective sea watching?
Yeah, I mean, well, all Linus's points were really great. Sea watching seems like it's kind of devolved a bit for us, that I think less and less people are doing it. And I don't know if that's just that we're not transferring that information over as well. It's funny in the eBird world now that, sometimes I like having fun and manipulating people, going, oh, I could send everybody here tomorrow if you post a good bird from there, right? And people tend to be, I always feel kind of now reactionary birding, like, oh, there's this good bird reported here, I'm going to go there and look for it.
They have
as
the data
opposed
now.
to, where, back in the day, and I remember, when I first moved here to Ventura 20-some years ago, 25 years ago, in certain times of the year, sea watching was the first thing I did in the morning before going and doing other stuff. And I have to say, even myself, I've kind of fallen away from doing that. And some of that yielded some great results. I still have Ventura County's only yellow-billed loon, which I found while sea watching, and got the word out such that a couple people got to see it before it disappeared. And we used to have people that just did that more frequently, and now I just don't see that as much. And I certainly myself am guilty of that. I will do it for the Christmas bird counts when we need that, when we don't have boat support. Or, if there's certain places, like if I'm down the coast, I go to the Navy base at Point Magoo where I have access. I sea watch when I'm there, and I've found now there's redneck grebe that's been wintering there for 7 years now that I found initially, and I find that bird every year. It comes back. And I will check some of the other spots, but I don't do it quite as religiously as I used to. But certainly, and one of the great places to do it locally is like that coastline along by Point Magoo, like the rock that you see in all the car commercials. Magoo Rock. I mean, that's a great place to sea watch from. They kind of screwed up the access there a little bit. You used to be able to kind of walk out to the end of the rock, which maybe wasn't the safest thing. And now, because of safety issues, they've kind of closed off this gap in the fence there. But you can still, from parking lots on either side of that rock.
You have to kind of pick your side, right?
Yeah, but it's a great place for watching seabirds, and especially then it's right now this time of year, late March, early April, for migrating loons and scoters, and this is around that window. I think March 27th is when I found the yellow-billed loon years ago. So yeah, I mean, it's a really great window now to pick up on things, and it's something about to sea watch, you really have to be patient. You have to be kind of committed to it. But you watch enough flocks of scoters go by, you pick up a long-tailed duck. If you sit there and you just watch all these birds and you're real careful about going through them, and you could occasionally find some really spectacular things that we don't even consider occurring even in the near shore environment. But strange things show up, but you have to be out there looking to find them, right?
Right, and this was like Linus's report of the albatross, a few weeks ago now. Like you,
yeah, it was probably about a month ago. Yeah, not something particularly expected here in the channel from shore. In the end, it became reported just as some species of albatross. It was either a black-footed or a short-tailed. There's a piece of evidence pointing towards black-footed, but probably not as strong as you'd require when you have such a unusual observation. But regardless, kind of an albatross really gives me the shivers, especially from land where it's
right. I mean, that's
much more special.
Right, that's one of very few albatross sightings from land in Santa Barbara County ever that have been documented, right?
As far as I understand, yeah.
Yeah. So, and it's kind of, it's ironic in a way, like not being able to identify if it was a black-footed albatross or a short-tailed albatross. It's like it was super rare either way. It was a great bird, but you didn't get to pick one specific one and get it down in the list. It had to just be albatross species.
Yeah, to me in the end, it doesn't matter too much, just because albatrosses are kind of like the peak of pelagic bird awesomeness, and just whatever species it is, that just the way they fly and behave and kind of master the wind is really phenomenal to watch. So
I definitely agree with that. I want to kind of move things along because I've got a lot of cool stuff. I want to get to those pelagic birds, get offshore and move along for the topic of sea watching. But before I do, does anybody else have a question they want to ask Dave or Linus about this Sea Watch topic in particular? I'll give it a second and look for hands, or you can just unmute and blurt it out if you feel like doing that. Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead then and move on. I'm going to try to move on. There we go. So method 3, we talked about walking the beach. We talked about sea watching. Now we come to the, sort of the pinnacle of pelagic birding. You take a boat, you go out in a boat, which, as resource investments go, is probably the most resource intensive of all of these. It can be pricey if you're, trying to bird on a budget. But I, have done it a fair amount over the last few years and have found it very much worth it. So, and there is kind of a hierarchy of expense if you're trying to, watch your dollars. I mean, right now, actually, it'd be very difficult to do it if you don't have your own boat, because a lot of or maybe all of these commercial operations have suspended their activities. But hopefully at some point in the not too distant future, this will be an option again. And I think some of the, maybe less expensive options or less pelagic bird focused options are the, you take a ferry, that takes you offshore, you go from one place to another, or you go out on a fishing boat. There are sport fishing boats that take people out for the day. Or you go on a whale watching trip, which has the added bonus that you're going to go probably see some whales. And, in all of these cases, you're not specifically out there looking for seabirds, and you probably aren't hanging around in just the right places for seabirds, but you are out there, and you're out there in a place where you can see a lot of these species that don't come close to shore. And I'm just going to kind of go along. So then in that sort of ferry category, Island Packers has the concession to take people to and from Santa Cruz Island. And, they do island trips where they take you out there and people hike around and then come back at the end of the day, or camp out there and come back, on a subsequent day. And I think that is probably somewhat less expensive in some ways than the dedicated pelagic birding trips. And again, you have the bonus, you get to see the, only island endemic bird species in the country, which is the island scrub jay. But then the really cool one is to go out on a dedicated pelagic birding trip. And Dave Perexta has organized all the ones that I've gone on out of that Island Packers. He's done in conjunction with Island Packers for, well, at least the last 3 years or so. Maybe you can amplify, Dave, on how long you've been doing those.
Yeah, well, gosh, I've been setting up the Santa Barbara Ventura area trips probably since about 2011 or 12. I've been involved with them for a number of years. And pelagic trips have kind of gone through, again, a different evolution or devolution, and maybe somewhat similar to the sea watching, but it used to be that all the Audubon groups ran pelagic trips. Los Angeles Audubon used to have a pretty robust schedule of 5, 6, 7 trips a year, but all those groups kind of really got disinterested in running them anymore. Variety of reasons, from insurance and liability issues to the fact that if you're an organizer of these trips, I will say people just like to complain. Birders like to complain. Hate to say it, right? But you laugh because right? It's kind of true. And Audubon just they just got frustrated and they didn't want to do it anymore. And so Todd McGrath and myself and a few others kind of sort of picked it up. And I will say, any of the pelagic stuff I do with island packers, whatever else, I don't make any penny on that. It's not a profit thing for me at all. In fact, I don't even break even on the time I spend putting it together. But what I'm doing it for is getting these trips organized so people have the opportunity to go offshore and see these birds that you really either can't see from land or can't see very well from land, right? I mean, and I've always done that when I do these talks. You can sea watch, and sea watching's great, but you could see black-vented shearwaters from hundreds of yards away or a half mile away or more, or you could see them in a boat where they fly right by, right? So you do get a different experience in boats. So we've tried to maintain that and at least give people an opportunity to have a boat that they can go on and take these trips out there. And I will say I've been really proud of the trips we've been running, and I've learned a lot from a lot of different people. I led for Debbie Shearwater and Brian Pattison back east, and I've been kind of in a bunch of different oceans and with a bunch of different providers and going out looking at birds, and I've kind of pieced our trips together based on a lot of those experiences and things that I like that other people do and things that I don't like. And I feel that we run some pretty good trips, and not only do we, run a good trip, but, I think we've been finding some pretty great birds. And, it's one thing to take a boat out and keep people comfortable and safe and keep them happy that way, but it's finding birds is a whole nother, voodoo thing. And we've learned a lot about that. And I do, cheat with some of my professional stuff and bring in some elements of things from there. But I've been really proud about how we run these trips. And even though they can be a little pricey, and there are reasons for that, and if someone asks that question, I'll be happy to answer it. But they are a great opportunity to get out and see all these birds that you're going to talk about in your talk. So
yeah, no, it's very true. And again, I think you do a great job. And I don't, as I say, I don't begrudge the cost. I think it's money well spent if you have it. I certainly encourage people to give it a try. And in fact, I want to talk about, I want to bring in Anne, if I can, and talk about the trip she took, which is actually out of my price range. So I'm very interested in hearing what it was like to do that 9-day trip down to San Ignacio Lagoon. So Anne, are you there? I see you're active in the window, so I assume you're here and available. I'm going to go ahead and try to bring up your slides that you forwarded to me. I thought they were very fun. Okay. Okay, so if I've done this correctly, we should see
I thought that picture looked familiar.
Yeah, you got your name on the side.
It's like I took one just like that.
You did. This is your photo. Thank you very much for taking it. So Anne, can you tell me what we're looking at here?
Yes, this is a whale watching trip that Robert and I took. It left on the Royal Polaris from San Diego on February 26 and returned on March 5, just before the quarantines began. It was sponsored by the Cabrillo Marine Aquarium in San Pedro, which is basically a part of the LA city government, in a sense. Parks and Recreation. And the boat was normally a deep sea fishing boat, sport fishing boat. And there were 30 passengers, 6 staff, and by staff, I mean scientists, with the good fortune of having Dave be one of them. And you'll see none of these are my pictures.
Yeah, you were having too much fun to be taking pictures, right? You were enjoying the experience.
Well, and so we left from San Diego, went down, visited some islands, spent 2.5 days in Laguna San Ignacio, where this is what we were doing in the panga, the small boats, which are driven by the pangeros, local fishermen.
And can I ask, are you guys actually bailing out the boat? Is that what's going on there?
That's pretty funny. No, what happens is that the whales very much like the sound of trickling water. And so we're making that sound to invite them to come to our boat and come near to us.
Wow.
So we're inviting them, and you can do it with your hand or a pail.
I'm going to go ahead and step through the slides if that's okay.
Yep.
Or I'm going to try to. Let's see if I succeed. How about this? This will step through for me. Well, no. Slight technical difficulties. Okay, so here you have a whale responding to your trickling water.
Yes, and you can see the baleen hanging from these are gray whales, the baleen hanging from the upper jaw, which is what filters when the whale takes kind of a big gulp of muddy water, it filters out the yummy stuff for him to eat as food.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and step through. So you hear the whales kind of doing a little bit of a, would that be a spy hop, or does it need to come up farther out of the water?
Hopping. Yeah. Spy hopping, yes.
So it's taking a look around and seeing what you're up to.
Mm-hmm.
Here it is, kind of diving under the boat. And there you can see the Royal Polaris in the background, so people get a look at the boat you were on for the 9 days. And then there was actual birding on land as part of this, right? You were going in the estuary there?
This was in the mangroves, which despite, in addition to the whale watching, for me, was absolutely a twin highlight of the trip, going to the mangroves, which are off of Laguna San Ignacio, and seeing these, first of all, seeing the mangroves, which I'd heard about, and it was like entering a magical kingdom. And I think that when we were in the mangroves, I saw 7 birds I'd never seen before. Little blue heron, tricolored heron, reddish egret, white ibis, which is what we're looking at. You notice the curved beak. Yeah. Red phalarope, Ridgway's rail, which I believe we used to have in the salt marsh and no longer do. You can correct me if I'm wrong.
No, I believe that is correct. Yeah.
And that was a big thrill, just seeing that rosy colored breast. And he walked in amongst the mangroves. And then the yellow mangrove warbler, which is like a yellow warbler, but with a kind of a dark red head. Yeah. But he would be flying in the very sort of amongst the very tops of the mangroves. So that was just, well, I could have gone there every day. That was a really magical place. And we were fortunate when we took that trip that we had 3 expert birders, Dave, and I think 1 or 2 others who, one in each of the little boats, who could kind of lead us in spotting these phenomenal birds.
Yeah. I'm curious, how long were you actually down there at the lagoon versus traveling to and from?
2.5 days.
2.5 days at the lagoon?
Yes. Yes.
Neat. Okay.
Yeah, it's basically 3 days down, 3 days there, 3 days back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then what marine mammal are we looking at here?
I believe that's a female sea lion. What do you think, Dave?
That's an elephant seal.
Ah,
I mean, that's what I meant. Female elephant seal. Sorry, I misspoke.
elephants, lions, they're both in the same conceptual category. I can see that mistake easily.
Sorry.
Mammal's a mammal. Yeah.
That's right. They're not birds. Who cares?
Yeah.
And there's a little bit better view of the Royal Polaris with a whale photobombing it in the front.
The whales used to go up to these.
So what are these folks so happy about? What are they high-fiving over?
Well, I think just the fact that we were on this trip and on the boat, seeing whales, seeing birds, and just if you can go back one slide for a moment,
yeah,
I could add something.
Sure.
If you look and you can see those spouts at the bottom of the boat, and the gray whales would like to come up very, very close to the boat and go under the spouts and have the water come down on them. And although we were not present for this, some of the people who were on the boat said that on more than one occasion, a gray whale came and just stayed there and looked up at them for quite a long time. And for them, I think that was the highlight of the trip.
Yeah. Well, if you can't have a bird experience, that sounds like a pretty good substitute, having a close whale encounter for a long time. All right. Well, I think that is it on the slides, right? Oh, nope, we got another one. Oh, actually touching the whale. There you go.
Yeah.
Now, is that a requirement? Like, do you have to get, you must touch the whale or you get a refund on your trip, or?
No, but almost.
It's a highlight.
Yeah, that's just to show it can actually happen.
Yeah. Well, and it's, I mean, obviously it's important to respect the animals and keep your distance, but if you're in a situation where they're approaching you, it seems like a pretty reasonable accommodation of the animals' need for distance, and so you can have that experience. It must be very memorable.
Yeah, and if I could add one more, a couple more things, which was a couple other highlights, was when Dave found, is it a Cassin's auklet? Is that the?
Oh, yes.
Yes, and he can tell that story better. But on our way back, our last full day at sea, where I guess I'd given up hope of seeing anything more spectacular, although we kept seeing whales and spouts and so on. Then these albatross appeared, the Laysan albatross and black-footed albatross, and I believe Dave saw a third kind too, that just followed us for a long time, and that had been one of my heart's dreams, to see an albatross, and we just had a wonderful time getting to be with them. So that's it.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Ann. That was probably not as fun as being there, but very, very close. That was a lot of fun to hear about. Okay, I'm watching my time and I'm kind of lagging. I mean, it's been fun to do all the chatting, but I'm going to kind of go into hyperdrive here and zip kind of quickly so we can get to a later point in the presentation, and then get our break in, which is important too. So let me go back. Let's see. Yeah, so here I am presenting. We're talking about pelagic trips. I'm going to skip this video, but this is a YouTube video that I took during the Island Packers trip that I took back on March 8th, I think, or 9th, March 8th, I think. And it's just, when there wasn't a bird around, I was sort of spectating, and there's a whale encounter and some dolphin encounters. So I took some video of that and put it together. I'm going to put a link to that in the description of the live stream YouTube video of this event. So you can go click through and look at it if you want. But in the interest of time, I'm going to skip it. But there's some cool photos we saw some gray whale mating activity, and Dave made some, sort of dorky dad jokes on the PA that I captured on video. So that'll be there too. If you want that, you have to go seek it out.
Oh no, you got the sausage fest comment, didn't you?
Yeah, that's exactly. because there were two male whales and they both rolled, belly up at the same time. And we're like, whoa, there's two males there. That's kind of interesting. So again, you can see that on the video. I captured that moment forever. I will always treasure that. I want to talk really quick about some ocean bird adaptations. And now we're kind of moving more offshore and talking about these really offshore birds. And you know what, I think I'm going to go ahead and do a quick pause here before I do that, because we've been going for a little over 45 minutes. I know some people have a hard stop coming up. So if you need to dip out and maybe you can catch the end of the meeting on the YouTube live stream, which is going to be archived later, then you could maybe handle it that way. But I'm going to take about, I guess, 5. Okay, can you guys hear me now? I'm trying to do two things at once. I'm trying to manage the participants and I'm accidentally muting myself, and isn't that typical? But I'm going to go ahead and officially take a 5-minute break now. I'm going to stay here and keep the meeting going. But I'm going to pause the presentation content. I'm going to stop the screen share briefly, and we'll go back into, let's see, I'll go into gallery view if I can figure out how to do that. I used to know how to do this.
It's on the left, I believe, John.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Left
you touch the screen and then it says, and then it has,
Right. I need my meeting controls is what I need, right? Maybe if I go full screen, maybe that'll make it easier.
And the iPad, this has been interesting because it doesn't give a lot of control. And even though everything has worked seamlessly, in the middle of my screen, it says waiting with a thing going around in a circle the whole time, even though there's no lags or no breaks in the audio, but I have no controllability of anything. So, but this is the first time I've used it.
Yeah, I have found the same thing, that when I'm testing and I'm using an iPad, that it's a little bit of a hit or miss experience sometimes. Like it's a dancing bear, right? It's amazing that we can do this at all. It's not how well it dances, but the desktop experience I found is pretty good most of the time. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and we'll say I'll start up again at 4:55. That's in 4 minutes. In the meantime, if you want to go, grab something to eat or a libation, we can drink at these meetings now, which we couldn't do before because we had to drive home afterwards. I'm going to also launch, I've got a couple of polls, and I'd like to ask folks, if you have a chance to go ahead and take these polls in the Zoom interface, those of you who are here in the Zoom meeting. And it's just a couple, I'm trying to gather some information about, what dates and times might work well for people for future meetings. And then I have a second poll, I guess I can bring up after this one runs, for what particular types of content you might be interested in the future meetings. So, and I'm not even sure if I can do 2 polls at once. Maybe I can do 2 polls at once. No, it looks like just 1 poll at once. So I'll run this poll for a few minutes and then I'll launch the other one for a few minutes. This might be a good time to ask if people are have feedback or questions or just comments you want to jump in with. I would be interested in feedback on how this whole online experience is working or not working from your perspective. I'm not competing with much. If we're all stuck in our houses and we can't go out and have an in-person meeting with the library like we were doing previously, maybe it doesn't have to be that compelling to be compelling enough, but I would be interested in your honest feedback. If there's things you think we could do better or do differently that might make it better, or if you just want to say, oh no, this is fabulous, you guys are great, you can say that too. But anyway, if anyone wants to jump in and give feedback, I'd be interested in hearing it. Anytime now.
I'm the guest, but I think it works great. So
yes, well, it highlighted the right person, right? It's giving you your opportunity to share your insights. I was joking, before the meeting started, that to me this is this is great for me because I go on these pelagic trips with you, and I have all these questions, and I want to ask you questions, but you're super busy. You're on the PA or you're looking for birds, or So it's fun to be able to just ask you questions and just whatever I want, I can pepper you with.
John, I'll just offer that this is the next best thing to actually being at the library for your programs. It's a wonderful offering, so thank you for doing it.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you for showing up, and thank you for showing up at the library, but also thank you for showing up online and giving your feedback. Yeah, I mean, you know, we'll see how it goes. It's an experiment, right? It's see how it works. Yeah, if people like it, we can keep doing it. I could probably, you know, see my way to doing this more often than we did the library meetings. I could do this once a week if people are into it. I can't guarantee you I can bring in this level of expert talent every week, but I would do what I can. You know, I'm just looking, I don't see that there's been any commentary on the YouTube chat, but if anybody in the, you know, viewing the YouTube live stream, 30 seconds from now, they will hear this. And, you know, if you want to put comments or questions in the chat on YouTube, I'd be happy to address those here as well. All right, well, with that said, I think I am going to go ahead and jump back in because I do have some cool content I want to get to. So I'm going to go ahead and hopefully figure out how to go back to sharing my screen. Oh yes, it all comes back to me. And then I need to find the presentation again. Here we go. Okay, so I was talking before about, oh, actually I want to do one more thing. I want to get my video panels view back so I can see your smiling faces. There we go. I started to talk about this before. So now we're moving offshore and we're talking about birds that you really have a hard time seeing from the land. And on some level, it feels a little unfair to me as a person who always looked at those birds in the field guide, but had never done a lot of pelagic birding, that, you know, well, why don't I get to see a northern fulmar? You know, they're out there on the ocean. I'm right at the edge of the ocean. Or why don't I get to see an albatross or, you know, these alcids of various kinds? And Dave, I'd actually like you to weigh in if you think I'm wrong about this, but my assumption is that, you know, these birds that have evolved to live at sea, you know, they're perfectly happy being at sea, but for them, the land is a dangerous alien environment, right? If they show up, you know, next to the shore, they've got to deal with land-based predators who they don't have to deal with out in the ocean. And, you know, where their adaptations for staying at sea for long periods don't necessarily buy them anything. Is that correct in some way, or is that at least not?
Yeah, I mean, you know, the way that they've evolved to just come to land to breed, and like the case of fulmars, they, you know, breed on islands up in the Arctic around Alaska and Russia, and
Yeah.
then, you know, they're just adapted to live their lives at sea and spend the majority of their lives there, and they do that, I think, pretty comfortably.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's really no benefit for them in any way to come to land. It just doesn't serve anything to them. And then oftentimes, if you do see a seabird on land, it's not having a good time, right?
Yeah.
Whether if you see a Jaeger sitting on a beach, chances are it's sick or something. And you'll get this with fulmars too. In an eruption year like this, we had fulmars on our trip to Baja that were like 330 miles south of the border, which is as far south as I've ever seen a northern fulmar. But, you know, at some point we had more dead ones than live ones. Eventually our live ones eclipsed that. But yeah, these birds, yeah, they're adapted to live at sea. And if you do see them on land, when you see a loon on land, it's having a bad day, right? So yeah, they don't need to. And you know, it's amazing because I don't think we can comprehend it living the lives we do, all stuck in our homes now. But you know, these birds really don't need to be away from the ocean surface, and so yeah, they do a great job of living their lives out there.
Yeah, and so I'm just going to step through. You know, I made some bullet points here, but I'm a little intimidated to be presenting my summary of seabird adaptation, ocean bird adaptations to someone with your background. But I'm just going to step through these real quick, and you can tell me if you know any of these are glaringly wrong, or if you think of one that I'm not talking about. This is just a quick overview. So again, they remain at sea. You know, a lot of them only come on land for breeding purposes. A lot of them, or pretty much all of them, they can actually drink seawater. They get their water needs met, or maybe from their prey if they're eating fish, but they don't need a fresh water source. They have, in a lot of cases, a highly developed sense of smell. So some of these species, like the fulmar or like the storm petrels, you know, I had no idea this was the case until I started going on these pelagic trips, and you guys would, you know, focus on areas where, oh, you know, the one spot off Anacapa where you suspect maybe there's a rotting whale carcass on the bottom of the ocean, and maybe it's giving off some fumes, or there's some oils or stuff coming to the surface, because it's a really good spot for these storm petrels or for birds that might, you know, congregate. Or when you, you know, you'd get West Fritz on the stern kind of chumming with some stinky fish guts, and then you'd see these seabirds just like tacking up wind, following that scent plume to the boat. You know, they're very, very good at like, you know, smelling those food sources and following them up.
We also make sure that Wes never washes his jacket either, so that probably helps too.
So you get more of that seabird action.
Sorry for interrupting. I'm going to drop out now, but thanks for having me, and thanks for presenting this topic and you know, bringing some awareness about sea watching and seabirds. That's great.
Well, thank you, Linus. I really appreciated you coming on. So yeah, take it easy.
All right. Thanks. Bye.
Again, I'm going to step through pretty quick. Oh, so a lot of these birds also, you know, they're very good at diving underwater, and something I didn't appreciate until the day I went to the, I think it was the Seattle Aquarium, where they have this, you know, all-sid display where they had a big tank with some, I think some common murres and stuff in it, and they throw the fish in there, and like, oh my God, they're flying underwater. You know, they use their wings to locomote like penguins do, right? They're under they're flapping their wings, and they're scooting all around really fast. So I thought that was, you know, an interesting adaptation that they have. Oh, and then this I thought was just a fascinating subject. I was reading some about this long distance ocean flight, which, you know, the albatross is sort of the classic example, but a lot of them are doing versions of this where, you know, they can soar for thousands of miles with hardly ever flapping their wings. And it's just this complex, or, you know, not to them, but I mean, it's an interesting process where they're using the high altitude up, the higher winds that are faster, and the lower winds like in between the waves that's slower, and they can like swoop up in the air and pick up speed in the high altitude winds, and then crank a turn and go back upwind in the low speed winds and maintain their velocity, and just kind of do these swooping arcs where they're not doing any flapping at all, but they're using the wind's energy to just, you know, cover thousands of miles. And then slope soaring is more what I think of as like conventional soaring, where you've got the wind making a, you know, traveling upward over a wave, and you'll see the brown pelicans at the beach doing this, where they just are right down in the front of that advancing wave, and they're just riding that updraft of air without having to flap at all. Again, was any of that egregiously wrong, Dave? Because it's, you know, I'm a layperson reading a few articles on Wikipedia.
No, I think you're right on. And in fact, you know, I did skim all your slides beforehand, so I was, you know, I didn't see anything in any of your slides that seemed like it was off. So
okay, well, I'm going to keep on rolling. So so then another thing I found really interesting when I started doing pelagic trips a few years ago is that, you know, from a birding perspective, the ocean is pretty empty. I mean, large stretches of it are relatively empty. And, you know, you find places where there's just an amazing profusion of birds. Like, you know, this photo I took on we were coming back from a day trip to Santa Cruz, and it's the only reason I was taking pictures that day, because usually when I go on these pelagic trips, there's so many people with such huge cameras that I just love it. I'm just like, oh, I get to just look through my binoculars and enjoy, you know, what's happening. And I know there's going to be fabulous photos with way better equipment than I have to enjoy later when we share all the images on the eBird list that Dave puts together. But on this day, it was not a birding trip, so I was trying to get photos. And, you know, we had just a big group of sooty shearwaters and western gulls. And, you know, you find these feeding assemblages, you know, these feeding concentrations where maybe there's dolphins underwater or predatory fish underwater, and bait fish are trapped at the surface. And then you get, you know, this super dense accumulation of seabirds, and it's very exciting. And if you go on a pelagic birding trip, you know, they will seek that stuff out. It's one of the frustrations of the non-pelagic birding trips, like these ferry trips or fishing trips, that they might not, you know, be focused on going to that same group of birds. But if there's a big group of birds on a pelagic birding trip, you know, they're gonna go there. I'm just gonna zip through these slides pretty quick. one of the things that they do on these pelagic trips, and I doubt you can really see this very well in the shared version, but basically this is showing the underwater topography south of Santa Cruz Island. And there's this very deep basin, the Santa Cruz Basin, where it's like, 1,000 fathoms deep, like a mile deep, the water is there. And then you come up along the edge of it and it's more like, maybe 600 feet deep, just 100 fathoms. So there's this very steep drop off. And where you have these steep drop offs or seamounts or things like that, steep sided undersea canyons, you tend to get upwelling, right? You tend to get the water that's deep down, that's got a lot of nutrients in it, being sort of lofted up to the surface. And that's where you find a lot of your pelagic bird species, because they're not silly. They're taking advantage of those resources. And it's kind of, again, not really clear, but this is coming back from a recent pelagic trip. And this was the track that the boat had taken that I snapped a photo of on the way off the boat, or as we're coming into Ventura Harbor. And you can kind of see it kind of goes in that same area. It's following the edge of that Santa Cruz Basin, where there's better birding over here. And then they're coming over here where there's a little bank there. Yeah, and Dave, I'm sure.
That was our October trip, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that's right. You could just look at the track and go, oh yeah, that's that trip. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Well, then the thing is, when you look out there at that far western edge of it, you see how crazy the line gets.
Yeah.
That's where we were on all these different birds and changing direction. And so, yeah, when you look at these tracks, when they get all kind of wacky and twisty, that's when all the good stuff was happening.
Yeah, definitely.
And in that particular day, as you might remember, when we got out to that western edge, we found a bunch of things, and then we came across there, going west to east, and it was a pretty, birdie run the whole way. The origins of that and our whole plan started the night before with Todd McGrath and I sitting in a Chinese restaurant in Oxnard, looking at charts on our phones and going, what are the sea surface temperatures doing, and what are the winds looking like, and we went out there, and there's times you can go on a boat, and this is the risk you take anytime you go out, is where are the birds going to be, and John, because you've been on these trips, and I always say, like, we may go for periods where we don't see anything, could be hours. And I will say the natives get restless. People pay to go on a boat trip. They want things to happen, and they want it to happen all the time, and it's not realistic, right? But we have learned how to kind of stack the deck in our favor, and we went to that spot out there because there was an interesting temperature change, which we thought would bring food up to the surface. And sure enough, right when we got to the point we wanted to be on, that's where we started seeing all these Caveries, merlets, and all these other birds, and all the skuas we had that day, right? And so it was all that stuff happening, and it was right where we thought it was going to be. And you don't always get that lucky, but that any of the luck we had that day was certainly informed by a bit of homework beforehand, and trying to find things that are gonna where the bird's gonna aggregate, and there are certain things that help figure that out. So
and I mean, again, I can verify that from my experience. Like, that is one of the main reasons why I don't begrudge at all the $100 or a couple $100 it costs to go on some of these pelagic trips, because I couldn't buy that expertise and go. Even if I had a boat of my own to go out there, I wouldn't know where to go. And that's not the only benefit I get of that expertise. I'm going to talk about that in a minute, which is, I'll talk about it now. So it is challenging for me. It's very challenging for me to identify ocean birds. And, there's a lot of reasons why it's challenging. And so some of the things that make it hard is that you're seeing these birds, often you're seeing them very briefly. I mean, there are those very memorable, spectacular close views where, the bird just swoops right down the side of the boat. You're like, whoa. But a lot of the time what you see is, a little speck flying away, and, you don't get a great look at it. And trying to look through binoculars from a moving boat, especially when the boat's moving fast, is, maybe there's people who are better at it than I am, but I find it very challenging. Like, if I can get any kind of view at all, that view is like bouncing around in my binoculars, and it's tough. So that makes it hard. The birds are, a lot of birds are kind of similar looking. They're dark on top and light underneath. They've got that counter shading that helps protect them. So from predators under the water, they blend into the sky, and and predators above, they blend into the ocean. Not a lot of real distinctive, colorful markings on these birds. And what distinguishing field marks that they do have, again, tend to be pretty hard to see, and if they're avoiding the boats like they often are, you're getting a distant view. But all is not lost, because it turns out they are identifiable, especially if you have Dave Corexto or similar person on board. So one thing that helps is there's a relatively low species variety. So if I go to Lake Los Carneros and spend a few hours there, I might see 40 or 50 species. On a pelagic birding trip, you're going to be seeing fewer. You're going to be seeing maybe a few dozen species out there on the oceans if you're lucky, right? So there's fewer species to keep track of and differentiate from each other, but they're very special species you can't get on land. So it definitely, balances out in that sense. And then there's seasonal occurrence. So, certain times of years, if the birds migrate in their relatively long range migration patterns you see from a lot of these birds. You might have one species, is likely to be there in the fall or not there in the spring or vice versa. And, if you keep track of that and you know what you can expect, it makes it a lot simpler. And then this is the big one. And this is, I think, the thing I've learned, the most from going on these trips is you're not so much looking for little field marks. You're not trying to match the picture in the field guide per se. What you're really focusing on is, distinctive size variations and behaviors and especially flight characteristics, right? The specific way that the bird is flying in a lot of cases is like a fingerprint for these birds, because it's very specific to, their size and just, they're very different. They have different wing loading, right? The bird's mass versus the surface area of its wings is different. And you can see that when you learn to look for it. And that's something that you can see, at a great distance without a lot of magnification. That's kind of why, even on land, when an experienced bird watcher is identifying some bird that's 5 miles away, it's like, well, they're not seeing plumage characteristics. They're seeing its flight pattern, its flight characteristic, and that's what they're identifying it from. Also, photography really helps. Again, you go on these boats, it's like being at a paparazzi stakeout, and there's so many long lenses these folks have, and they're very good at getting photos. And with that good equipment, they can really freeze that motion, right? The boat's bouncing around, but they can get a nice sharp picture and really zoom in on it. In effect, it's like having a spotting scope on a nice stable surface. You can really get a good look at the bird and study it. And finally, you get the expert help. You have the people like Dave Prex, and on these pelagic trips, typically there's 2 or 3 additional experts who are along, and they're stationed around the boat, and they're calling stuff out, and they're communicating by radio and over the PA. So really, as a novice pelagic birder, you can go out there and have a great day and not be spending hours and hours trying to identify things. You just want to know enough about what they're reporting that you can get on the bird and see it, but they'll identify it and they'll find it. And I'm getting a little better, but I'm still like missing most of these birds until they're actually pointed out by the experts who are scanning for them. So, anything about that you want to comment on, Dave? Or
no, I mean, those are really great points. And yeah, and it's funny that it does provide this opportunity. And I think towards, like, I don't know if you were on the trip where we had the 5 booby species.
I was indeed.
And, yeah, so only people to ever do that, to ever see all 5 North American boobies in a day. And some people came up to me, now that's like the pinnacle. I mean, I almost wanted to drop the mic after that trip and say, maybe we can't top this, and maybe I should just
just retire,
go look for warblers in the fall or something. But it's funny, people came up and they're like, oh, that was my first pelagic trip, and so you can in fact, one of the rarest birds I've ever seen off of Southern California was on my first pelagic trip, maybe why I got hooked or whatever. And so yeah, having all that. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I mean, I remember that trip, and I'll always remember that trip. But for me, the most memorable thing about that trip, I mean, the boobies were wonderful and spectacular. For me, the most memorable thing about that trip was your reaction when you got the 5th booby, because you had been talking earlier in the trip, in, I don't want to say disparaging terms, but a little bit of a, when people get so excited about these birds that they get, they make such a big deal out of it. And then when you got that 5th booby, you lost it. It was quite exciting to experience that.
Yeah, well, I pointed to the right field fence from the dock on that. I just felt like if there was going to be a day to see all 5 boobies, that was going to be the day. Like we
That
could
was the
do
day.
it. And,
All right. Well, I'm going to
and-
actually.
and-
Oh, please go ahead.
Got the
I'm
hat
just saying
trick.
it's
Yeah.
yeah,
Sure.
but it's rare to you know, there's a lot of times we're very optimistic at the dock for one reason or another, and sometimes that doesn't always work out. But yeah, having that happen and everybody enjoying that, I mean, that, and it's funny, as I was up in Portland recently for a conference, and I went up to see the Siberian Center in Washington State, and someone I never met before was talking to me, and we got to talking about seabirding, and then he finally looks at me and he goes, "Are you the 5 booby guy?" So it's like, that trip was so good that's how people know me. And I still, it's funny, I'll run into people I haven't seen in years, and they bring that up, you know, like, "Hey, I heard about that trip," and they're, you know, congratulatory and stuff. But
Yeah, we'll have to get it on
yeah.
a t-shirt. You can just say, you know, 5 boobies per extra. That's you.
I know, right? I mean, I just have my puffin shirt today. So
Okay, well, I do see a few questions in the chat, and I'm going to get to those, and I'm going to, you know, pose some of those, but I want to zip along a little bit because, again, I'm mindful of the cool stuff later on that I want to be sure I get to. Oh, actually, we're there, so that's great. So we're at the point where I switched to talking about the local species, and it sort of just highlights, you know, these are the ones that I recall seeing a fair amount on the pelagic trips I've done. So it's not all the possibilities out there. There's some definite rarities that show up, you know, once in a while. But these are the ones that you know, if you do some pelagic birding out of in you know, this part of Southern California, you've got a good shot at seeing, well, black-footed albatross, maybe not such a good shot. I still have not seen a black-footed albatross on a pelagic trip out of Ventura, but I know they're out there. Just got to get far enough out there.
We got, yeah, that one year we went out deep 2 different times, and we're able to get them. And I had this sort of idea that, like, if we get past this one certain point, we may be able to find blackfoots on a day trip, and we did find sort of what that spot is. It's just a challenge to get there in a day and back.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm gonna, before I jump into the species, I'm going to just zip through the chat a little bit. I see that Brody, who again was the inspiration for this talk by requesting ducks at the last in-person meeting that we did. He mentions he's had a red crossbill around his house, which is very impressive. That's exciting. And also he wants to know what's in the cage behind me. So the aquarium, I assume you're talking about, Brody? Give me a nod if, yes, you're nodding. So that used to be fish, and then the fish passed away over a period of years. And then I neglected the fish tank, and the water level just got lower and lower and lower. Inspired by the fact that I knew I was going to be having this live stream, I said, I've got to clean the fish tank. So what you have in there is a bunch of water and some plants that are probably 10 years, 15 years old. So the plants are still going strong. So it's more of a terrarium than a fish aquarium at this point. It's plant specific, but I'll get some fish in there soon. And then I see a question. So Craig Murray asked, do most pelagic birders use gyro or image stabilizing binoculars? And I've seen a few of the people with those out there, but I don't see them as much as I'd expect. I'm curious, you know, Dave, do you know if those are useful in a pelagic setting?
I mean, you know, some people use them. I see whale watchers using them more than birders. Some birders do. You know, I think, and I've had people point this out to me, especially on like a multi-day trip. I lead the searcher trip every fall out of San Diego. We go out for 5 days. And someone said, like, you're your own image stabilizer, like that. You know, I find if I'm standing in the bow, that my body is reacting to the boat.
Yeah,
it's
you
funny,
bend your knees and kind of stay fluid, and you can.
Yeah, and it's like, yeah, you become your own stabilizer, and you learn from doing the trips what the best way, even to hold the binoculars, are to provide that benefit. But yeah, you know, I know some people use them and like them, but you know, then it is kind of such a specialized piece of equipment that you don't see a lot of people doing it. But I'm sure there's benefits to it.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and jump into some of these actual species now. So we start off with Brody's ducks. These are the only ducks I'm actually going to talk about in this talk. But these are scoters, which are, you know, ocean specific ducks. They're ducks I think I've seen scoters in an estuary sometimes, but they're very much saltwater species, and you really see them out on the ocean, I think, more than anywhere. There's 3 species of scoters you might see around Carpinteria, around Santa Barbara County. The surf scoter, is the one we're going to see most frequently and in the greatest numbers. Every now and then, if you're lucky, you might see a black scoter mixed in with them. The males especially are easy to spot with that little orange base of the bill. And a white-winged scoter, again, occasionally, like if you're doing like Linus was mentioning or David was mentioning, if you're out sea watching and you just check out these flocks and you've got hundreds and hundreds of scoters migrating by, maybe you see one with white in the wings. You go, whoa, white-winged scoter. And I apologize, but I'm going to zip through these birds pretty fast because, again, we're getting kind of late on time. Another species that I guess you're going to see from shore a lot, but you also see them out in the ocean on pelagic trips.
Cormorants.
Cormorants, yes. Everyone loves cormorants. They're fun birds. So we have all three of these species of cormorants in Carpinteria. If you go down and do a sea watch, or you just walk the beach and check out all the cormorants as they go by, you're going to see a fair number of double-crested cormorants, and these are the ones you're going to see on land more, or you're going to see in inland waterways. And then you've got your pelagic cormorants and your Brandt's cormorants. I'm not going to get into too much detail about them, but they're very cool and they reward study. And I was just like cormorant species, like I can't tell them apart, I can't be bothered. But in the last few years, I've paid more attention to them, and they actually have quite charming individual natures that I recommend them. I like cormorants. I'm going to keep on going because I want to get to the ocean birds, the more pelagic species. All right, loons. We've got 3 regularly occurring loon species, the very occasional additional species, as David was talking about, with his yellow-billed loon, you say?
Yeah.
But the ones you're going to see from shore around here, for the most part, you've got your common loons, which are sort of like the big, bruisers, big thick beak. Your red-throated loons, which are slimmer with the sort of upturned bill a little bit. And then the Pacific loon. This is not a great photo of one, but I was putting the slideshow together in a hurry, and that's the one I found. For some reason, the Pacific loon has been my nemesis bird this year. I don't have it on my county year list, and it bothers me that I don't have it. So if you happen to have a Pacific loon, in Santa Barbara County, let me know. And despite the travel restrictions in effect, I'll probably decide that is essential travel for me to go see that Pacific loon.
Sea watching right now at this time of year is the best way to see Pacific loon.
Yeah, and I've actually been, counting on the fact that, over the next month or so, right, they're going to be migrating north, and I just need to go out to a point and I'll see all the Pacific loons I can get because they're just going to be streaming by in big flocks.
Yeah, now's a perfect window. So
yeah, I will do that. Thank you. So then I want to talk about Jaegers. I think Jaegers are just so cool. So we've got 3 species of Jaegers. The parasitic Jaeger is the one you're going to see from shore most often. Long-tailed Jaeger, I've seen a bunch of on these pelagic trips, but I think that's the only time I've ever seen them is getting offshore a little bit. And Pomeranian Jaeger, I think same thing. I think I've only really seen those on pelagic trips. And for me, it's very helpful to have the experts along to tell me what kind of Jaeger I'm looking at, because I look at them and I can tell they're Jaegers because they have this sort of characteristic Jaeger flight style. It's a very sort of aggressive flight, like they're kleptoparasites, right? Or is that just the parasitic Jaeger? Dave, are they all kleptoparasites? Are they all like chasing down other birds?
All 3 of them are, yeah.
Yeah. So they're chasing down other
South
seabirds.
Polish skua too.
Yeah, which I have later on. But and I guess I didn't realize for a long time that a skua is basically like a big Jaeger, right? It's a big sort of thuggish version of a Jaeger.
Yeah.
So they specialize in chasing the other seabirds. The other seabirds catch a fish, and then a Jaeger chases them until it makes them cough it up. So they're like fighter pilots. They're very maneuverable. They're very fast. And when you learn what their flight looks like, you can really key in on that and recognize them. They really stand out from the gulls and other birds that are sort of similar around them because of this Jaeger flight that they do.
And their distribution at sea is affected strongly by the species that they parasitize.
So they're following them around.
Yeah, so you see parasitic Jaegers close to shore because they go after like small to medium-sized terns.
Yeah.
Pomeranian Jaegers are larger and they're going after maybe small gulls or small shearwaters. So they're oftentimes a little bit further offshore. And then long-tailed Jaegers, parasitized things, they follow the Savins Gull Arctic tern migration, which is way farther offshore generally. And so those long-tailed Jaegers are pretty far out, and we get excited anytime we see them on a pelagic because it's the least likely of the three we see because they're generally much further off.
Yeah. And so I've got a video here of a Jaeger in flight, but I'm going to call an audible and skip that too. But I encourage you to go, check out the links on the YouTube live stream and watch that video because I want to talk about shearwaters. So this is another one of those, very pelagic species. It's pretty hard in my limited experience to see them from shore. And when I have, it's usually like a tiny little thing, a tiny little speck in the spotting scope that's way out there. But again, they have this very characteristic flight style. So if you learn to key in on their manner of flight, you can tell them. We have a lot of sooty shearwaters at the right time of year out here. A lot of black vented shearwaters. Right on that last pelagic trip we did, there was a ton of those back in early March. And then the pink-footed shearwater, which I think we had a few of on that. But didn't we have one or so on that last pelagic trip in March? I'm not sure. But then we get more of them. Yeah, I'd have to go back and look.
Yeah, I'd have to look. Yeah, I know there's very few this time of year, but they tend to show up now around April when they start showing up from South America.
So just a quick example of what I've been talking about flight characteristics. If you look at the black vented shearwater here in the lower left and the pink-footed shearwater in the lower right, I mean, at least in these photos, I mean, those look like very similar birds, right? They look like they would be very hard to distinguish. And in fact, the pink-footed shearwater is significantly larger. But again, if they're not flying next to a yardstick and it's this little bird at a distance, it can be kind of hard to tell exactly how big it is. But the flight characteristics are key. So I want to show this is first a video, and I'm not sure how well this is going to come across. It might be kind of chunky in your view, but again, I encourage you to go find the link in the YouTube live stream description and watch these videos so you can get the full effect. Oh, this is the pink-footed. I thought I had all right. Pink-footed shearwater first. So it's flapping relatively slowly, right? When it does these flaps and glides and it kind of arcs up and down again. All right, so keep that in mind. And now here's going to be a black vented shearwater. This is the smaller species. Okay, so it's flapping much more rapidly, and it's kind of hugging the water maybe a little more, although all shearwaters do that. I think that's where they get their name. But less of that looping up into the sky. And again, the very rapid wing beats. So, I think I'm now getting to the point where I'm starting to feel fairly comfortable about distinguishing those two at sea, and it's almost, it's 95% flight characteristics is what I'm going on in those cases. And then finally, here's a brief YouTube clip of a sooty shearwater, just kind of intermediate in terms of the flap rate. Whoops, no, it's not what I wanted. Here we go. And this kind of bouncy view of a distant bird kind of disappearing behind the waves. That's a pretty typical pelagic birding view. So if that doesn't get you excited, then maybe pelagic birding is not for you. But that gets me excited. All right, and then I've got sort of a grab bag here of some species. The northern fulmar, the south polar skua down here in the lower corner, and the black-footed albatross. I just think they're just all super cool birds, and I really, have loved the chance to see them. As I said, I still haven't seen a black-footed albatross on a Ventura or Santa Barbara County pelagic trip. I've seen them, on a motorboat trip up the coast to the Bay Area, going through Monterey Bay. We saw a bunch of them, and that was really neat. And I saw one black-footed albatross like many years ago out by San Nicolas Island during a sailboat race. It's been kind of funny for me that, I grew up sailing and sailboat racing offshore around the Southern California islands. And I really regret now that I ignored the birds for the most part. Like I was a bird watcher on land at that time, but for whatever reason, I guess I was just too busy, sailing to pay attention. And I didn't have expert birders along to kind of show me the ropes. But I certainly remember seeing a black-footed albatross come by one time. That was that was a memorable experience. Oh, and then Alsit. So I really did want to get here, and I'm glad I got here just barely in time as we're running out of time at the end of the meeting. So these are, to me, the sort of classic pelagic birds. These are, auklets and murres and these birds that live their lives at sea and come ashore to breed, and that I never really saw until I started doing pelagic birding, or certainly never identified. They were just little specks on the water. We've got the common murre, the upper left-hand corner, the rhinoceros auklet in the upper right, pigeon guillemot, which I guess I've seen a lot, like they hang out near the shore along Santa Cruz Island, right? Because they're breeding in little caves along the rocks there. So
yeah, and you don't see them very far offshore in general, that they feed near the islands they're breeding on, and yeah, you wouldn't see them generally far out to sea.
Yeah, so they're kind of an outlier in this group, right? And then the Scripps is murrelet. Yeah, well, continue, Dave, if you have something else to offer.
Oh, I was just gonna say, if people want to get good looks at pigeon guillemots and not get on a boat, if you go a little further north, like north of Point Conception, places around Port San Luis or Morro Rock, or especially around like Monterey, they nest under some of the wharf there and things, so you can get good looks at pigeon guillemots while your feet are firmly planted on the ground or a pier or something.
Yeah, and then
we just don't see them close to shore so much down here, just around the islands.
And the murrelets, we have a number of different species, but I guess the Scripps murrelet is the one we're seeing most typically on the Santa Barbara County waters, right? We get Crevaries murrelets at other times of year. Is that?
Yeah, Scripps is the local breeder, and then Crevaries, which breeds in Mexico, some years comes up further north in warmer water in like the late summer and early fall. And Scripps tend to move north and move out of the way. And then if we're really lucky, and I'm trying to find a way to do this on a day trip, maybe out of Santa Barbara, and I'll see if I want to risk publicizing this, and then if it fails, people will hate me. But I want to try to organize a day trip to see the Guadalupe murrelet, which used to be conspecific with the Scripps murrelet. If you have an old book, it says Xanthus murrelet, but that got split into two different species, and the Guadalupe breeds off of central Baja on a couple islands, and very small population too. They're one of the rarer alcids in the world, but we've kind of found where they turn up off Southern California, but it's a little bit further offshore, and might try to get the Condor to run some trips to go look for them, and we'll see if that works or not.
Well, good luck making that happen. And then the Cassin's auklet, not to treat it dismissively, but it's kind of there at the tail end of the list. We see them out there kind of skittering away from the boat, like the all dark little alcid, as opposed to the murrelets that are sort of black on top, white underneath. And again, I'd love to talk about these guys more, because they're just all really cool, fun birds. But I have run out of time, really. So I need to zip through, and so I can get the 5 boobies. We talk about Dave's 5 boobies in one day, in one pelagic trip. Now, you didn't get them all in one county, which is a little disappointing, because I know you're very Ventura County. Well, you're not very Ventura County oriented, but you are the person in Ventura County eBird in terms of the totals. And I'm very focused on Santa Barbara County. So when I go on these pelagic trips, we cross that county line, I'm the kind of annoying person who's like, yeah, okay, I'm gonna go get a snack, whatever. Maybe you'll see something good in Ventura. Maybe I'll take a look. Maybe I won't. Doesn't really matter. I mean, it matters. But anyway, but here's our
that is the day I got. That is the day I got my Ventura County red-footed booby, which was the last one I needed for Ventura County. So
yeah.
I was pleased as punch.
I can verify. I saw you pleased as punch. So all of these are kind of fun, and not birds I really ever expected to see. I saw them on nature documentaries, or people who come back from trips to the Galapagos and talk about the boobies they saw there. But they are, small numbers of them are out there. Somewhat larger numbers of the brown boobies are now nesting on Santa Barbara Island, which, by a weird quirk of how county bird boundaries are figured, is Santa Barbara County waters, even though it's kind of a little circle of Santa Barbara County all by itself out there, well to the south of the rest of Santa Barbara County. So those brown boobies are Santa Barbara County boobies, which makes them A-OK in my book. But on these pelagic trips that do go out and visit Santa Barbara Island, at least lately, you're pretty much guaranteed at least brown boobies, and often, one or two of the other kinds as well. Oh yeah, and storm petrels. So this is the last group I wanted to talk about. And again, I'm kind of out of time, so I'm just going to mention them briefly. But they are really cute. They're little dainty birds that kind of dance along, flutter along just above the water. They are aggravatingly similar looking to a novice, but if you have enough experienced birders with you, they'll point out things like the different flight style of the ashy storm petrel and the black storm petrel. Like the black storm petrel is a little bit larger, and its wing beats are deeper. Am I remembering that correctly? Like they've got the relatively deep wing beats as they're flying, whereas the ashy storm petrel is a little bit shallower. And if you start looking for it, you can really see it, and it's kind of exciting when you kind of make that breakthrough. And then Leach's storm petrel with a white rump, although there are several other storm petrel possibilities with white rumps, and at that point I'm just like saying, okay, you guys with the cameras, or ladies with cameras, get a good photo and you tell me what I saw. I mean, I saw it and that's great, but all right, well, okay, so I'm going to skip this too. There's a video at the very end that if I had time, I was going to show, and it's a really interesting video. It talks about the black rat eradication program on Anacapa Island, and it's got some really cool footage of Scripps' murrelets in their breeding caves, and they've got murrelets in there all hunkered down, and some other cool. They've got some I think an ashy storm petrel, and they've got some other cool birds that are now breeding on Anacapa Island as a result of the successful effort to get the invasive black rats off the island. So again, it's a very interesting story, and I encourage people to check it out and watch the video. But I talked too much and didn't leave enough time to talk about it during this presentation. And that is it for the slides. I'm going to stop the screen share, and we are back in gallery view, which I think is what I wanted. So that's it. Here's an opportunity if people have sort of summing up questions or final questions. I encourage you to unmute and just ask them, or throw them into the chat. Yeah, the chat. So
I was just gonna say that my class was gonna go to Anacapa, and right once you said that there was a bunch of cool birds there, I got disappointed because it got canceled.
Yeah, a lot of fun stuff is getting canceled lately.
Yeah.
But do what we can to help the healthcare providers do what they can, and slow the spread of the pandemic, and hopefully we get through all this and we get back to where we can go on group outings and pelagic birding sessions.
Yeah.
That's right. Gotta sign up for those pelagic trips.
So
especially if I get any trips on the Condor, we need people to sign up.
Yeah, so that's a bit of a sales job you have to do. That's not like the Island Packers folks.
Yeah, I mean, there's a history with the Condor. We did a couple trips where we beat people up pretty bad, and we saw some great birds, but they were rough days, and a lot of people got sick, and so it's just kind of created a stigma there. And the last time we got a successful trip out on the Condor, which was a really great trip, and we were sensitive to the weather, and we saw lots of birds in the channel and by the islands, but we had to almost invite people like individually, like to get people to sign up, and just it's not realistic to put in that level of effort to do it. So I'm going to talk to the Condor people when life gets back to normal and try to get some trips out there. But yeah, we can only keep these things going if people sign up for them. So
Okay, well, good luck on that. I will be one of those hoping that it happens, and if it does, there's a decent chance I will
excellent.
Dig into the savings and say, oh yeah, this is worth doing. All right, well, I want to thank all of you for participating. Thank you, Dave, especially. I don't know if, I think Anne has probably left, and I know we lost Linus, but thank you to you guys. And thank you to the rest of you who showed up and participated. I really had, no idea if this would even work, but I enjoyed it a lot. I hope you guys got something out of it. I'm going to go ahead and I'll look at those poll results and see if you haven't already, entered your preferences in those polls. I'd say go ahead and do that really quick now before I end the meeting. I am planning to, I think I'm going to do now, after saying goodbye and waving and, a little collective group hug at a safe distance. I'm going to end this meeting, which will kick you all out. And then I'm going to go ahead and immediately restart the meeting at the same meeting URL and ask that, maybe the co-hosts and anybody else who wants to give feedback kind of come on back in, and we can have a little after party. We can have a little post-meeting discussion, but it's absolutely optional, and it's not going to, I'm not going to stream it on YouTube. I'm not going to record it. It's not going to be out there for posterity. It's just going to be, whoever chooses to come back in. But thank you all very much. Any final words or comments from folks? This is your chance to speak.
I sort of just wanted to say that the red-billed crossbill wasn't supposed to be here for 100 years in Santa Barbara County.
Wow. And so, well, that's very exciting. Maybe, if we have a future meeting, we can talk about it in more detail and get more details about your cool sighting.
Thanks. Yeah, I can't really figure out how to get the video on, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. As far as these online meetings go, this is it's a work in progress. I'm on the steep part of my learning curve on how to even pull this off. I guess I'm a little disappointed we didn't have any Zoom bombers. No one came in and started like shouting bad language. But maybe that's definitely for the best. So I'm glad about that. Anyone else before I shut things down?
Thank you so much. That was a really great presentation. I learned a lot.
Well, thanks, Jenny. And Meliz and Steve, that's my sister and brother-in-law waving there. Thank you. Thank you guys for showing up. Carol Murray, hi.
Thank you, John. Thanks so much.
Yeah,
Thank you, John.
Great.
Yep,
Yeah.
I
thanks,
think
John.
you did a really good job. Well done. Thank you
All right.
very much.
Well, thank you guys. And with that, we'll end the meeting, and I will see you soon. Look for an update from Tom on the email list. If you're not signed up for the email list, go ahead and sign up.
Awesome.
And,
Thanks a bunch, John. It was great. Really. Thank you.
And
so
thanks,
long,
David.
everybody.
Thank you.